Hey everyone, welcome back to another hardware news recap for the week. In this one, we'll be talking about rumors about the RTX 3070 Ti, because yes, we need another one of those. We'll also be talking about the UK stepping in, at least somewhat, on the Nvidia-Arm acquisition. As we've said for a couple of months now, Nvidia and Arm are in an agreement for Nvidia to acquire Arm, but it requires government clearance and regulatory body approval, so the UK looks like it's going to be a bit of a hurdle for Nvidia there. We'll also be talking about a fraudulent VESA DisplayHDR certification in air quotes there, because it's not a legitimate one, but it was popping up on some monitors online. And Dell with a really shady warranty practice. Before that, this video is brought to you by ASUS and the ASUS TUF Gaming B550 Plus Wi-Fi motherboard, ready for AMD Ryzen CPUs. The TUF Gaming B550 board comes in ATX and Micro ATX variants, with key features including a Wi-Fi 6 module, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, a fanless chipset heatsink for quiet operation, and a focus on stability and uptime. Learn more about the TUF Gaming B550 Plus Wi-Fi motherboard at the link in the description below. So the first story isn't something we bothered scripting out, and it's not necessarily news, but it's important. We were going through the purchasing process on Dell's website for an Alienware machine that AMD just published a video about on its own channel. And in the process of buying the Alienware machine, while scrolling down the page, we noticed a couple of things. First of all, there's sort of a banner blindness that happens, as in the advertising term banner blindness, as you scroll down, because there's so much stuff on the page that it's not really clear exactly what you're looking at sometimes. And this isn't a big deal necessarily, except it has the knock-on effect of helping to obfuscate the fact that it is auto-opting in to a $9.99 per month, we're gonna round that up to 10 here, $10 a month service package. So basically, in the process of looking at the systems we looked at on the Dell website, it is auto-opting in to a $10 per month charge. But don't worry, Dell emailed us to correct inaccuracies, quote unquote, in our statement, because Dell wanted us to know that the first month's free. So it's all okay then. It's okay to auto-opt in to a service that you aren't inherently planning to buy by buying a product. It's okay to opt into it without knowing, as long as the first month's free. And then you just pay for it every month after that, you never use it. It's really good value. That is, it's really good value for Dell, because you're paying $10 a month for a service which offers $0 a month of value. But this is a service package that is auto-opted in. That's the important part here. And there is a standard free, as in included, 1-year warranty with the computers, as long as you step down to it. But you do have to step down to it, at least on the systems we looked at on the Dell website. And this warranty thing, the service options at the very bottom of the page, after scrolling past keyboards, mice, monitors, upgrades for every component in the system, paint color options, it's almost literally one of the last things on the page. And better yet, there's no add to cart button under it. So we scrolled down looking for the add to cart button past all this stuff, had to scroll back up to the top. The reason that's significant is because the likelihood of someone getting to the bottom of the page and reading it thoroughly is very low. And in Dell's agency's email to us, it wanted us to know that, don't worry, down at the bottom of the page, in that little section where it auto-opts you into the radio button for $10 a month, they're technically telling you that they're charging you $10 a month, so it's okay. But the line drawn between probably legally fine and morally bankrupt is a very clear and obvious line. There's nothing confusing about it. Dell knows exactly what it's doing. And the reason we're bringing this up in the news video is because they're launching computers right now, and a lot of people are buying pre-builts right now, especially people in DIY, because you all know it's hard to get a video card. And so buying a video card by way of buying a full system is one of the best ways to do it without getting completely gouged by an independent video card sale. And that means people are turning to pre-builts like Dell's. And that means that people are panic buying pre-builts. So the fact that this option has been there for longer than the panic buying issue is really only makes things worse than what we were saying. But the real problem right now specifically is that people are panic buying the systems because, and we saw this by the way, I took the time to screenshot and read that whole page for video purposes later. In the couple of minutes I took to do that, the SKUs were disappearing one by one. So you go to checkout, oops, that video card's gone. Let's go back, add a different one, take some screenshots, take some OBS capture, check out, it's gone. And that means that people who are buying these things in an instant are probably not reading the full page. So if you bought one recently from Dell, go make sure that you didn't accidentally sign up for something you didn't want. If you don't want that $10 a month service, make sure you cancel it before it starts charging you after the first month. And there's a lot more to this story. We'll be back at it with a full content piece in the future, but wanted to put this out there now because it's Linus covered it in his Secret Shopper series, and I actually hadn't seen this specific part about Dell until some of you pointed it out. But Linus's issue was a little different and more egregious, where Linus's team explicitly said that they didn't want the warranty, and then Dell invoiced them for it anyway. So it's sort of in the same category of that. There's just one bucket that both of these issues fall into, and the label on the bucket is slimy, and that's it. So just watch out when you're buying pre-builts right now to not inadvertently pay for a monthly warranty or support service you're not going to use. And of course, our thanks to Dell's agency for reaching out and clarifying that, in fact, this is all intentional and they know exactly what they're doing. Next story is the UK stepping in on the Nvidia and ARM deal. So as expected, the Nvidia-Arm deal is facing an increasing amount of hurdles and potentially opposition as regulatory bodies have to go through the approval processes. The proposed NVIDIA-Arm merger is already set to face a great deal of scrutiny in China, and the deal is currently under a developing investigation in the US. The FTC in the US is currently probing for more information regarding the acquisition. Now the UK has made it clear that it too will intervene on behalf of its own national security concerns. The UK's Competition and Markets Authority, or CMA, already launched an investigation into the merger back in January, and it did so on grounds of antitrust and monopoly concerns. However, the UK's Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport has now called for the CMA to also look into the national security implications that the deal may have. According to the intervention notice filed by the Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, the CMA will have until July 30th, 2021 to report its findings regarding the national security aspects of the proposed NVIDIA-Arm deal. ARM has long been based in Cambridge and is deeply integrated in the security of devices using ARM technology, and it stands to reason that the UK is worried about a foreign company acquiring it. We've reported on this in the past, but Herman Hauser, ARM's co-founder, has fervently opposed the deal from the onset, calling on the UK to get involved and even launching a website called savearm.co.uk to halt or at least alter the deal. In the meantime, as we reported last week, NVIDIA recently took the wraps off of its first data center CPU design named Grace. NVIDIA's Grace is an ARM-based CPU that will use next-gen Neoverse, presumably from ARM's new ARM v9 architecture, as well as NVIDIA's NVLink, which is a CPU to GPU interconnect. All of this raises more questions as to how NVIDIA can remain a neutral, even-handed third-party home for ARM, while offering what would become its own product, and also still offering the hundreds of ARM licensees that NVIDIA is competing with a fair shake at using it. It'll likely be several more months before we have a better idea of how this will play out. However, NVIDIA is still confident that it can push the deal through. With the 3080 Ti now functionally confirmed to exist in a 12 gigabyte SKU, it's time to move on. Everybody's bored of that rumor, and so we're going to move on to the next one, which is the RTX 3070 Ti. For the 3080 Ti, the only bit of news or change in the last week, other than MSI's mistake that we reported on, has been that there's a May 26th release date target, allegedly, according to the rumors right now. That would be a May 25th review timeline. And the next one is the RTX 3070 Ti, alleged to exist by HKEPC. HKEPC's Chinese language coverage cited AIB partners in Taiwan, most of them are in Taiwan by the way, as the source for the information for this leak. HKEPC says that the RTX 3070 Ti will be available in early June. The media outlet said that the GPU will be GA104, which is currently used in the RTX 3070, the 3060 Ti, and some mobile devices. The 3070 uses GA104-300, the 3060 Ti uses GA104-200, and the 3070 Ti is rumored to use GA104-400. HKEPC says that this will run 6144 CUDA cores and 8 gigabytes of GDDR6X. The G6X inclusion here is what's going to make it a potentially high-value target for crypto miners because of the faster memory. So keep that in mind as this one rolls out. As for the die names and the silicons, GA104 is the GPU. The physical GPU is going to look the same from what we know right now as the 3070 or 3060 Ti, but there'll be some things toggled in it. Some SMs will move around or get disabled based on the spec that NVIDIA is trying to hit. Next one's about VESA, which is a standards and certification body for displays. So VESA confirming that there is in fact no DisplayHDR 2000. This was an illegitimate claim that started popping up on Taobao recently, and VESA put out a statement to make sure everyone's on the same page. VESA in its statement said, quote, "There is no DisplayHDR 2000 tier in the VESA DisplayHDR specification and logo program at this time. VESA has no knowledge of the origins of the DisplayHDR 2000 logo currently posted on these display listings on the Taobao website. However, VESA takes any misuse of our trademarks and logos seriously. VESA doesn't endorse the use of this logo unless and until a DisplayHDR 2000 tier has been officially announced by VESA, and any products claiming to meet this tier level have been officially certified by VESA and listed on our website." This is after a couple of monitors were listed on Taobao, and those were then picked up by media outlets talking about the monitors. So VESA is responding specifically to the Samsung Odyssey G9 and the Acer, oh boy, it's a monitor name. The Acer, we're going to go with EI491CR G9. They were listed on Taobao. Both monitors were listed with an illegitimate logo claiming DisplayHDR 2000 certification, and that is obviously not true. As it stands now, DisplayHDR 1400 is the latest VESA certification. Anything higher than that, like 2000, is illegitimate, and VESA has only certified a handful of displays for the 1400 spec as it stands currently. TSMC recently released its quarterly revenue numbers for Q1 2021, and with them an overview of how much revenue each process brings in. To start, TSMC disclosed that for Q1 21, it raked in $12.92 billion in net revenue, which is a 1.9% increase quarter over quarter and a 25% increase year over year. For the quarter, TSMC had a gross margin of 52.4% and an operating margin of 41.5%. All told, TSMC shipped a total of 3.36 million wafers throughout the quarter. TSMC noted that its advanced technologies, which it defines as 7 nanometers and below, accounted for 49% of its wafer revenue. Specifically, TSMC's 5 nanometer node accounted for 14% of the quarter's wafer revenue, while 7 nanometers accounted for 35%. TSMC's 5 nanometer revenue is actually down a bit quarter over quarter, while 7 nanometers is up. This isn't a huge surprise, as TSMC doesn't have nearly as many customers for 5 nanometers as it does for 7 nanometers, at least not yet. As for other process nodes that aren't 7 or 5, TSMC lists 20 and 10 nanometers as having 0% impact on Q1 21 revenue, although technically Intel could probably say 14 nanometers has 0% impact on its revenue. It's 14 nanometers and the various pluses that start to matter. Plus, I think we're on 4 pluses now for Intel. But we're talking about 10 and 20 for TSMC here. Some of TSMC's more mature processes are actually still seeing activity. 28 nanometers is a good example, which accounted for 11% of the quarter's revenue. And further, 40 and 45 nanometers are still getting used and came in at 7%. 65 nanometers is at 5%, and 90 at 3% respectively. And that's a great reminder that you don't always need the best possible thing to make the product. Because if whatever these products are that are using 40, 45, 28, probably it could be in anything. It could be in cars, for example. But anything using these older process nodes, as long as the product is achieving the performance it needs to achieve, then it makes sense to save the fab space of the more expensive, difficult to produce stuff for things that need it, that can't be produced without it. Breaking revenue down by platform, TSMC noted that 45% of the company's Q1 21 revenue came from smartphones, and HPC, or high-performance computing, accounted for 35%, IoT at 9%, automotive at 4%, and DCE and others at 4% and 3% respectively. Up next, an AMD software update. This is the Adrenalin 21.4.1 update, so it's for Radeon software suite, but it adds some CPU monitoring functions to Radeon software. Radeon software is somewhat of a necessary evil for certain aspects of using Radeon GPUs. Mostly overclocking is the necessary evil aspect of it because it doesn't always it really doesn't work how it should. It doesn't make a whole lot of intuitive sense. But the software package does offer some good things in it. For example, some of the better stuff it made in the past, AMD Relive, which is still in the software suite and has gotten some changes recently, and things like CAS have been interesting as well. But anyway, AMD has officially released 21.4.1 from its Adrenalin suite. It normally follows an annual cadence. It's a little bit behind this time for its Radeon software suite. Typically, it targets end of year or holidays for major rollouts. And considering the anomaly of 2020, I guess this is what we get for 2021. The new update comes with a number of new features and enhancements. A couple of them are definitely worth pointing out. So for example, AMD is trying to offer users more granular control over install options. Now there's a full installation, a minimal installation, and a driver-only installation option. Previously, you were basically offered a factory defaults option, and that was about it. On top of overhauling the installer, though, AMD is now offering the ability to monitor Ryzen CPUs, whereas previously the Radeon software only monitored GPUs. According to previews that are out there now, AMD has tweaked the Performance Metrics tab to better accommodate both CPU and GPU reporting and monitoring, and there's a new stress test feature as well. AMD has also improved its AMD Link, rolling out version 4.0. AMD Link has evolved quite a bit over the last few years and now offers a full Windows 10 client and app. And this means that users who are using AMD Link no longer need a smart TV or a smartphone to use the feature. AMD also notes that AMD Link offers support for 4K 144 FPS streaming. Elsewhere, AMD made changes to Relive, rehoming all of the streaming and broadcast tools into one tab, and there's also a new setup wizard called Streaming Wizard, available for first-time configurations. AMD is also adding Microsoft PlayReady AV1 decode support, and it's extending its Eyefinity support to Ryzen 4000 and 5000 mobile CPUs. So that Discord Microsoft acquisition that we were talking about previously, where Microsoft was allegedly in talks with Discord over a $10 billion acquisition, that, it sounds like, has fallen through. So this is not something that's heavily reported on other than the Wall Street Journal citing, quote, sources familiar with the matter. But Discord's talks with Microsoft in this report have been shelved for the time being. And Wall Street Journal notes that the deal isn't entirely off the table. Discord might be content with remaining independent for a while, but the company was also interested in exploring an IPO in the future from what we saw reported previously. According to Wall Street Journal, Discord's user base is currently at 140 million users, and the company earned $130 million in revenue in 2020. From the reporting, Discord isn't yet profitable, but it was apparently good enough to pique Microsoft's interests. Discord likely would have been used to bolster Microsoft's presence in social media and gaming, and it probably would have helped expand its obsession with chat software, useful for all the telemetry that Microsoft likes to do. Microsoft has also been on a spending spree this year in general. So far, it's spent $7.5 billion to acquire ZeniMax Media recently. It spent more than $19 billion to buy Nuance Communications as well. Up next, Intel has been locked in a bitter patent war with VLSI, which appears to be sort of a patent trolling shell. VLSI, we reported on previously, where Intel ended up owing the company over $2 billion for one of the lawsuits that Intel lost. But this most recent one, Intel came out victorious. There's one more lined up that we'll be getting more news on soon. But for now, Intel plans to appeal the first verdict. It won't have to appeal the second one. But a federal jury in Texas, in the same court that ordered Intel to pay VLSI $2.18 billion in the first trial, has decided that Intel has not infringed on at least 2 patents held by VLSI. These patents were previously owned by NXP Semiconductors and were issued 2 decades ago. The patents deal with MP3 player technology. So I know they're stuck on 14 nanometers, VLSI, but could you choose something a little more believable than MP3 player technology? VLSI was targeting Intel's speed shift technology, which is like an actively developed thing that's used, and saying that it was rooted in the MP3 player technology patents from a couple decades ago. Intel said, quote, "Intel is pleased that the jury rejected VLSI's meritless claims that Intel's cutting-edge processor," could use maybe more believable phrasing there with, the whole Rocket Lake thing. But anyway, that Intel's cutting-edge processors infringe on expired patents for MP3 player technology. VLSI is a shell company created by Fortress, a SoftBank-owned hedge fund, for the sole purpose of extracting billions from innovators like Intel. Mincing no words there, Intel said to Tom's Hardware for this quote. Intel had previously said that the patents weren't exactly cutting edge, even 2 decades ago when they were issued, a corporate burn if we've ever seen one. Additionally, Intel noted that the $3 billion in damages that VLSI was seeking was more than 3,000 times what the patents were valued at in past acquisitions. A third trial over similar patents is set to take place in June, and should you require more proof that VLSI and Fortress are patent trolls, consider that Apple and Intel, bitter enemies, forged a rare alliance specifically to battle Fortress and VLSI. Up next, there's a new storage crypto on the horizon, aptly named Chia. After being in development since 2017, Chia will be a new coin that users will, quote, farm rather than mine, and it will be doing so using storage space. So rather than a proof of work model, this is going to be a proof of time or space-time. It's a Star Trek coin. It's the space-time continuum model. What this means is that users on the Chia blockchain will allocate unused hard drive space to be seeded, as another keyword here, and seeded hard drive space will then be used to store cryptographic numbers, known as plots, on the Chia blockchain. Quote, Chia blockchain will seed unused space by installing software which stores a collection of cryptographic numbers on the disk into plots. These users are called farmers. When the blockchain broadcasts a challenge for the next block, farmers can scan their plots to see if they have the hash that is closest to the challenge. A farmer's probability of winning a block is the percentage of total space that a farmer has compared to the entire network, according to Chia. Chia also said, quote, proof of time requires a small period of time to pass between blocks. Proof of time is implemented by a verifiable delay function that takes a certain amount of time to compute, but is very fast to verify. The key idea of VDF is that they require sequential computation, and since having many parallel machines does not yield any benefit, electricity waste, they claim, is minimized. Of course, we can think of no better way for Linus to further monetize his business than deleting all of his old files and turning his 1 petabyte project into a Chia farming operation. Actually kind of want to see what that would look like. But overall, Chia hopes to create, it says, a better cryptocurrency that doesn't use specialized hardware like high-end GPUs or ASICs. That said, as anything else that gets competitive, as this gets competitive, higher-end hard drives are kind of specialized hard drives, and they are expensive, just like high-end GPUs. It kind of ends up in the same problem there. Chia claims that it will reduce energy waste or electricity use, and in anticipation of Chia's arrival on currency exchanges, we've already seen some reports of users panic buying storage ahead of the coin coming out and becoming publicly tradable or farmable, to the extent that HKEPC, whom we talked about earlier, reported users snatching up hard drives ranging in capacity from 4 terabytes to 18 terabytes. As a result, hard drive and SSD prices in Hong Kong are expected to increase by as much as 200 to 600 HKD, or Hong Kong dollars, or $26 to $77 US. Furthermore, one of China's biggest domestic memory manufacturers, Jiahe Jinwei, is already selling through all of its Glowway and Asgard branded 1 terabyte and 2 terabyte NVMe SSDs. This is in spite of the fact that Chia is ostensibly better suited to enterprise grade hard drives due to its read and write heavy operations. So time will tell what impact Chia will have on the crypto market and what kind of knock-on effects it has on consumer hardware. Certainly we have enough shortages right now. Storage doesn't need to become one of them, but that's the news in the crypto industry. Up next, Phoronix is reporting that the University of Minnesota got itself banned from contributing to the Linux kernel. Greg Crow-Hartman, the Linux kernel maintainer for the stable branch, banned the university and some individual contributors after 2 students at the university intentionally submitted vulnerable and faulty code to the mainline Linux kernel. This is a fantastic example of 2 students who think that they've figured something out that no one else has ever thought of because they thought they were going to prove that open source software is to some extent insecure by submitting bad code. This was allegedly done in the name of research using use after free, or UAF, bugs to purportedly show how unsavory individuals may introduce vulnerabilities into open source projects. You'd be hard-pressed to find a bigger open source project than Linux, of course, and as you might imagine, the experiment didn't go over well. The graduate students documented their research in a paper titled On the Feasibility of Stealthily Introducing Vulnerabilities in Open Source Software via Hypocrite Commits. The students apparently tried injecting multiple patches into the mainline Linux kernel, resulting in not only them, but their entire university being banned from future Linux development. According to Croa Hartman, quote, "I will now have to ban all future contributions from your university and rip out your previous contributions as they were obviously submitted in bad faith with the intent to cause problems." The Linux community largely seems to have agreed with this. Jared Floyd, who serves as a Red Hat technology strategist, probably said it best, completely agree with this statement, when Jared Floyd said the following, quote, "This is worse than just being experimented upon. This is like saying you're a safety researcher by going to a grocery store and cutting the brake lines on all of the cars to see how many people crash when they leave." The University of Minnesota has since responded to the ban and has stated that it's looking into the matter. It says it has suspended that line of research, forcefully in this instance. Additionally, the school says it will, quote, "investigate the research method and the process by which this research method was approved, determine appropriate remedial action, and safeguard against future issues if needed." Whether or not that's enough to get the ban reversed remains to be seen, but the cutting brake lines analogy is an apt one. So that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. As always, you can subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net or patreon.com/gamersnexus to help us out directly. You can get things like mod mats or behind-the-scenes videos, and we'll see you all next time.